Before the wedding, love and careful planning. Grace and Matthew were not the kind of couple who lived in fantasies. They both came from humble families where every grain of rice mattered. So from the very beginning, they learned to plan everything. When Matthew first proposed, it wasn't on bended knee with a diamond ring. It was one quiet evening under a mango tree. He had walked Grace home from the market, where she had been selling tomatoes and onions. He stopped, scratched the back of his head, and said, "Grace, we don't have much, but I believe we can build together. Will you marry me?" She laughed softly, her eyes glowing. "Matthew, even if all you have is this bicycle, we will share it. But let's plan well. I don't want us to start something we cannot carry." And that became their pattern. Every little step was planned. If Matthew wanted to buy a new pair of shoes, they discussed it. If Grace wanted to expand her market stall by just one basket of goods, they sat down at night with a lantern and talked it through. They knew their pockets were shallow, so their wisdom had to be deep. When it came to the wedding, they planned it like a project. No unnecessary luxury, no borrowed pride. They borrowed only what they could both repay, and even that was carefully calculated. Grace insisted, "We will not do more than we can carry. A peaceful start is better than a loud one." After the wedding, building a life on planning. Their marriage began the same way it was built, with joint decisions. They rented a small one-room apartment, not because they loved it, but because it was all they could afford. When the landlord demanded 1 year's rent upfront, they both contributed, Grace from her market savings, Matthew from his daily labor at a construction site. They even wrote their expenses down on a small exercise book they called the family book. At the top of every page, Grace would write, "What we spend today determines tomorrow." If they needed kerosene, they discussed how many days it should last. If they wanted to eat meat in their soup, they planned how to stretch it across the week. And when the loan repayment for their modest wedding came, they tackled it together. Matthew sometimes took extra shifts at the construction site, while Grace sold goods until late evening, her feet aching but her spirit determined. Each month, they marked the progress in the family book with joy. "See, Matthew," she said one night, pointing to the figures. "We can do this together. Next year, this loan will be behind us." Matthew nodded, pride in his voice. "That's because you're not lazy, Grace. Some women would have sat and waited for me alone. But you're truly my partner." Grace, the industrious woman. Grace was never the type to sit idle. Even on days when sales were poor, she would rearrange her goods, polish her tomatoes until they shone, or go door to door asking neighbors if they needed foodstuff on credit to pay later. Her mantra was always, "If my hands are moving, my home will not lack." She carried baskets on her head, bargained with wholesalers, and sometimes woke up before dawn to travel to a bigger market in the next town for cheaper goods. Other traders admired her energy. "That Grace," they often said. "She is young, but she works like a woman who already has 5 children. At home, she cooked, cleaned, and supported Matthew with encouragement. She didn't just bring money. She brought balance, reminding him to save, to be patient, to avoid debts they couldn't handle. For them, marriage wasn't just about love, it was about survival and building step by step. Planning for the baby. A year after their marriage, when Grace discovered she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. She ran to Matthew, holding the pregnancy test result in her trembling hands. "Matthew," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears of joy, "we are going to be parents." Matthew's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He lifted her off her feet and spun her around their tiny room, the leaky ceiling almost forgotten. "Grace, our home will have the cry of a child. God has blessed us." But almost immediately after the excitement, their instincts as planners kicked in. That night, they opened the family book and started a new section titled, "Preparation for Baby." They listed maternity clothes for Grace, antenatal clinic fees, small savings for hospital bills, baby things, tiny clothes, wrappers, soap, powder, a cot if possible. Grace sighed, "It will not be easy, Matthew, but if we both keep at it, we'll manage." Matthew kissed her forehead. "We've managed everything together. This too we will face." Grace's work during pregnancy. Pregnancy did not slow Grace down. If anything, it gave her more fire. She told herself, "This child will not suffer. I will work harder now so tomorrow will be easier." She kept going to the market every morning with her baskets, balancing her swollen belly and her goods with equal strength. Even when Matthew begged, "Grace, rest a little at least today," she would smile and say, "If I sit at home, who will feed us? Don't worry, I know my body." She bargained fiercely with wholesalers, sometimes waking as early as 4 a.m. to travel with other traders to the big town markets. Other women admired her courage. "This one is not lazy," they would say. "She is carrying pregnancy, but still working like 3 people." At night, when her ankles swelled, Matthew would massage her feet and whisper, "You're my hero, Grace. I don't deserve you." And she would chuckle, "Just don't forget me when the child comes and expenses double." The husband's efforts. Matthew, too, did his part. He took extra jobs at construction sites, sometimes returning home so tired that he barely ate before collapsing on the mat. Yet, even in his exhaustion, he never failed to ask Grace, "How are you and the baby today?" Together, they saved every spare coin. Sometimes it meant skipping meat in their soup, sometimes it meant walking long distances instead of paying for transport. But they were proud of their sacrifice. One evening, Matthew came home with a small, second-hand baby cot he had bargained for in the market. "It's not new," he said, embarrassed, "but at least our child won't sleep on the floor." Grace hugged him tightly, her eyes wet. "Matthew, it's perfect. It shows we are trying." A hopeful season. By the 7th month, their little room had transformed. Baby clothes were folded neatly in one corner. A borrowed mosquito net hung above the cot, and Grace kept counting the days to her due date. Every night, they prayed over the unborn child. "Father, make him great," Matthew prayed. "Let her bring us joy," Grace added. They held hands, dreaming of the family they would become. Neighbors admired them. "Those two," people often said, "they may not have much, but they live like partners. That is why their home is full of peace." The day that changed everything. But fate is a cruel thief. One morning, in her 8th month of pregnancy, Grace rose early, determined to buy stock before the market filled. She kissed Matthew lightly and said, "Don't worry, I'll be fine." He wanted to go with her, but he had an urgent site job. They both agreed. She would be careful and he would meet her later. She never returned the same. The accident struck like lightning. A reckless driver, a scream, baskets flying, her body hitting the ground. By the time Matthew arrived at the hospital, Grace was unconscious, her once bright eyes now closed. From here, the contrast becomes sharp. All their careful planning, all their sacrifices, and all their love stood helpless before tragedy. The hospital days. The accident landed Grace in the emergency ward of the General Hospital. Bloodied, her head bandaged, she lay motionless for days. Machines beeped softly around her. Nurses moved in and out, and the smell of antiseptic hung in the air. Matthew sat by her bedside at first, holding her hand, whispering, "Grace, it's me. Open your eyes. Don't leave me." Doctors explained that she had sustained a head injury. The baby was alive, but they needed to monitor both mother and child carefully. "It will be a long road," one doctor warned. "She might never be the same." Matthew nodded, his heart breaking, but he swore to stay strong. The weight of the bills. The first week passed, then the second. Bills began to pile like bricks on his back. Hospital admission, drugs, scans, consultations. Each slip of paper demanded money he didn't have. He tried. He sold his bicycle. He borrowed from friends at the construction site. He even went back to the same people who had lent them money for their wedding and begged for more. But creditors are patient only for a while. One afternoon, the hospital accountant stopped him in the corridor. "Mr. Matthew, if you don't pay something by tomorrow, we cannot continue with her treatment. We are running at a loss." Matthew's stomach knotted. His mind raced back to the unfinished wedding loan, still hanging over him like a noose. They had been so close to finishing it, just 2 months away. Now he owed more than he ever had before. A husband slipping away. At first, he tried to juggle everything. He worked at the site by day, rushed to the hospital by evening, and begged for money at night. But the more he tried, the more hopeless it seemed. His face grew hollow, his clothes loose, his voice tired. Grace's condition didn't improve much. She opened her eyes eventually, but her mind was not fully present. She mumbled, sometimes drooled, sometimes looked around the room as if she didn't recognize anyone. The Grace who once planned and fought through life with him was gone. And with each passing day, Matthew felt his strength drain. One evening, her mother asked gently, "My son, are you eating at all? You look so thin." Matthew forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mama. I'm just thinking of how to manage everything." But inside he was drowning. The breaking point. The day came when Matthew hit the wall. After being chased by creditors for the wedding loan, insulted by hospital staff for not paying on time, and mocked by coworkers for wasting his life on a vegetable wife, something in him snapped. He stopped coming every day. First, he came 3 times a week, then once, then not at all. At first, Grace's family thought it was work pressure. He must be hustling hard, they reasoned. But soon, whispers spread, "We haven't seen Matthew in weeks." Her father visited his one-room apartment and found it empty. Neighbors said, "He packed some clothes and left at night. We don't know where he went." The family's shock. Grace's family was devastated. They had welcomed Matthew as a son, admired how he and Grace planned everything together. Never once did they imagine he would walk away. Her younger sister wept. How can he abandon her now, after everything they suffered together? Her father clenched his jaw. Maybe poverty broke him, maybe shame pushed him, but whether he comes back or not, Grace is our blood. We will carry her. They had no choice. They sold farmland. They leaned on distant relatives. They begged their church for help. Slowly, painfully, they covered what Matthew left behind. The day of delivery. When Grace went into labor, it was chaos. Nurses rushed her into the delivery room, her body trembling, her eyes blank, lips mumbling incoherent sounds. She could not follow instructions, could not push when told, could not hold herself steady. Her mother, Mama Esther, stood outside the ward praying with a rosary in her hand. "God, please, don't take my child. Don't take this baby." Hours later, the cry of a newborn pierced the hospital corridor. A nurse stepped out with a tired smile. "She's alive. The baby is alive. It's a boy." Mama Esther broke down in tears. Both relief and sorrow mingled. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, though her heart ached, because she knew the mother who should have rejoiced did not even understand what had just happened. A mother who couldn't mother. They placed the baby in Grace's arms, but her eyes stared past him, unfocused. She held him awkwardly, like she was holding a piece of cloth. When he cried, she did not rock him. When he rooted at her chest, she sat still, drooling slightly, not knowing what he wanted. Her mother stepped in quickly. "Hold him this way, Grace. Let me help you." She adjusted the baby to her breast, guiding his tiny mouth. He latched on and began to suck, but Grace only blinked, confused, unaware of what she was doing. From that day, every breastfeeding session was supervised. Someone had to place the baby in her arms. Someone had to shift him when he choked. Someone had to burp him after feeding. Grace herself had no awareness. She would sit there, blank, sometimes humming nonsense sounds while her son nursed. The grandmother's silent tears. Mama Esther often sat opposite her daughter, watching her with a heart full of grief. Grace's body was alive, her beauty dimmed but not gone. Yet her mind was far away. Tears would fill the old woman's eyes as she whispered, "My daughter, is this what life has done to you? You used to be so strong. Always planning, always laughing. Look at you now." At night, when the baby cried, Grace would not wake. It was Mama Esther who carried him, rocked him, sang lullabies. When she looked down at his tiny face, she felt both joy and sadness. Joy because he was innocent, a fresh beginning. Sadness because his own mother could not care for him. The family's burden. Raising both Grace and the newborn became a double duty. Grace had to be fed, bathed, and watched constantly. Sometimes she would wander off, staring at nothing, mumbling words nobody understood. Sometimes she would laugh suddenly, or cry without reason. Her sisters took turns. One would cook, another would watch the baby, another would keep an eye on Grace. They had to be careful when leaving the baby with her. Sometimes she would forget he was in her arms, staring into space while he wriggled and cried. Neighbors whispered, "She's finished. She can't even nurse her own child." But the family ignored the gossip. They carried her with dignity, hiding their pain from outsiders. Daniel's early days. The baby Daniel grew under their care. He learned early to recognize not his mother's arms, but his grandmother's. When he cried, it was Mama Esther's voice that soothed him. When he was hungry, it was her patient hands that guided him to his mother's breast. As he grew into a toddler, he would crawl to his mother's lap, tugging at her wrapper, trying to get her attention. Sometimes she would pat his head absent-mindedly. Sometimes she wouldn't notice him at all. One day, as he tried to say his first words, he looked at Grace and said, "Mama." But she only stared, drool sliding down her chin. Mama Esther, watching, broke into silent sobs. She picked him up and whispered, "Yes, she is your mother. But for now, I must be both mother and grandmother to you." The weight of silence. The house carried a constant heaviness. Grace sat most of her days by the doorway, gazing into the street. Children passed by, staring at her. Some mocked, "Look at the mad woman." Others avoided her. But her family never stopped caring. They dressed her neatly, combed her hair, and fed her, even when she spat food out like a child. Her silence was painful, her vacant stare a daily reminder of all she had lost. And yet, within that silence, Daniel grew. He learned resilience not by being told, but by seeing. He saw his grandmother's tears, his mother's blankness, and his family's sacrifices. Even as a child, he began to understand that life was not fair, and that one day he must rise above it. A childhood without innocence. Daniel was not like other children. From the time he could walk, he understood that his world was different. While his friends played football barefoot in the dust, Daniel was often by his grandmother's side, helping to fetch water, running errands, or carrying small basins of goods to the market. At first, it was necessity. Mama Esther was getting old, and the family needed every hand. But over time, Daniel embraced it as his duty. He told himself, "If I don't help, who will?" The first hustle. By the age of 7, Daniel began hustling in small ways. He would help traders in the market carry baskets from one stall to another, earning a few coins. Sometimes he sold sachet water in the blazing sun, balancing a cooler on his head. His small voice crying out, pure water, cold pure water." With every coin he earned, he would rush home, place it in his grandmother's hand, and say proudly, "Mama, this will buy salt, or maybe soap." Mama Esther would hug him tightly, tears pricking her eyes. "My son, you are too young for this." But Daniel would shake his head. "I must help. One day I will make money, plenty money, and I will take care of you and Mama Grace." The insults of the street. The hardest part of his boyhood was not hunger or carrying heavy loads. It was the insults. Children in the neighborhood mocked him cruelly. "Your mama is mad. Your mother is an imbecile. Daniel, go and wipe your mother's drool." Each word was like a knife. He fought sometimes, his fists small but full of rage, often returning home with torn clothes and bruised knuckles. One day, after a fight, Mama Esther scolded him gently. "Don't fight them, my son. Their words cannot define you." But Daniel clenched his jaw, his small hands trembling. "I will not fight them with my fists again. I will fight them with my life. I will become great. And one day, they will bow to me." That was the day his determination became fire. A boy growing too fast. At school, Daniel struggled. Not because he wasn't intelligent, but because hunger and exhaustion followed him into the classroom. He often dozed off after long mornings selling water or carrying goods. Teachers scolded him, classmates mocked him. Yet, when exam results came, he always passed. He read by lantern light late into the night, sometimes sitting by his mother's side as she stared blankly into space. He would look at her and whisper, "Mama, I will make you proud. Even if you can't say it, I know you're listening." The burden of a silent mother. One memory burned in his heart forever. One afternoon, he came home from school to find Grace sitting outside, drool sliding down her chin, her wrapper stained. A group of neighborhood boys were dancing around her, clapping and laughing cruelly. "See the mad woman! See Daniel's mother!" they shouted. Daniel dropped his school bag and rushed forward. His fists flew wildly, his eyes burning with rage. "Don't touch my mother! Don't call her mad!" He fought until an elder separated them. That night, after everyone slept, he sat beside his mother and held her limp hand. Tears ran down his cheeks. "I will build a house where no one will laugh at you. I will give you a car, Mama. I will make people respect you again." Though she stared into the distance, her tears rolled silently down her face. The making of a hustler. By his early teens, Daniel had become known as one of the hardest-working boys in the market. He carried crates for shop owners, washed cars, and even shined shoes at bus stops. When people asked, "Why are you working like a grown man?" his answer was always the same: "I want to take care of my mother." Some pitied him, others admired him, but no one could deny his drive. He learned early that pity would not pay bills, so he hardened himself. If someone mocked his mother, he did not waste time fighting anymore. He only muttered to himself, "Talk now. Tomorrow, when I succeed, you will see." The vow of a son. One evening, at only 14, Daniel stood outside his small home, looking up at the sky filled with stars. He clenched his fists and made a vow. "I will not be poor. I will not allow my mother to die in shame. I will hustle until my bones break, but I will make it. One day, I will bring her to live in a fine house. And no maid, no neighbor, no stranger will ever look down on her again." That vow became his compass. Every hardship, every insult, every drop of sweat was fuel for the fire inside him. The end of secondary school. Daniel's years in secondary school were not easy, but they revealed the lion inside him. He was often hungry, his pocket money was small compared to his classmates, and sometimes he wore the same pair of sandals until they were patched with thread. Yet, when exam results were pinned to the notice board, his name always stood near the top. By the time he graduated, Daniel was not only among the best in his school but also among the best in the state. His WAC results were so outstanding that his principal told him, "You are destined for greatness, Daniel. Don't stop here." The university scholarship. Not long after, news broke that an oil company was offering full scholarships for brilliant students who excelled in their exams. Daniel applied, nervous but hopeful. A few weeks later, his name appeared on the official list, full tuition and living expenses for 4 years. When he brought the letter home, Mama Esther read it aloud 3 times before she finally sat down on the wooden stool, her hands trembling. "My son," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "God has lifted our head. Your father abandoned us, but the Almighty has not abandoned us. You will go to the university. You will wear the cap and gown. You will stand tall, and your mother will see you shine." Grace sat in her corner, blank as usual, but when Daniel showed her the letter, she touched it with her fingers and gave a faint, childlike giggle. That moment alone felt like a blessing. Preparing to leave again. As the weeks drew closer for him to resume at the university, Daniel felt the same heaviness he had felt when leaving for boarding school. Only this time, the weight was greater. One evening, he sat with Mama Esther under the mango tree outside their compound. The stars glittered faintly, and the night air was cool. "Grandma," he began softly, "I am happy for this chance, but I am afraid. Who will care for Mama when I am gone for so long?" Mama Esther sighed deeply, her eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. "My son, don't let that worry trouble you. Your mother is my child before she became yours. I have carried her since the day she was born. I carried her when she broke down. And I will continue to carry her until I have no breath left. Daniel's throat tightened. Promise me, Grandma. Promise me you'll watch her like you watch me. Feed her. Bathe her. Make sure she doesn't wander. Please, don't let her suffer. She placed her hand on his shoulder, firm but tender. I promise, Daniel. Go and study. Your success is her medicine. Your success is the only thing that will give her dignity again. The departure. The morning he left for the university, the whole neighborhood came to the bus park to see him off. They had watched this boy grow from hawking water in the streets to shining as the pride of the community. Mama Esther held his hand tightly, her eyes brimming with tears. She adjusted his small box of belongings, then pressed a worn Bible into his hands. Carry this with you. Read it when you feel alone. And remember, every step you take is not for yourself alone. It is for me. It is for your mother. Daniel hugged her, then knelt before her. Pray for me, Grandma. She placed both hands on his head and prayed, her voice trembling. Lord, guide this boy. Let him not fall into temptation. Make him a light in the world. And when he returns, let him return with joy, not sorrow. When he boarded the bus, he looked back one last time. He saw his grandmother holding Grace's hand, standing by the roadside. His mother's eyes were vacant, but his grandmother's gaze was fierce, unbroken. That image burned itself into Daniel's heart. Daniel's silent vow. As the bus pulled away, Daniel whispered under his breath, I will not disappoint you, Grandma. I will not fail you, Mama. I will return from this university not as a poor boy but as a man who will give you the life you deserve. And with that vow, Daniel's journey into a brighter future truly began, stepping into a new world. When Daniel first arrived at the university, he was overwhelmed. Tall buildings stretched across the campus. Students moved about in stylish clothes, some with laptops and expensive phones he had only seen in magazines. For a moment, he felt small, the son of a broken woman, raised by a grandmother who sold vegetables. But then he reminded himself, I did not come here to compare myself. I came here to win. The scholarship covered his tuition, hostel fees, and a modest stipend. But Daniel knew better than to rely solely on it. He couldn't keep calling home for extras. His grandmother was already carrying enough, feeding his mother, paying for her medications, and keeping their house afloat. So from day one, Daniel made up his mind. I must find a way to stand on my own 2 feet, balancing the books and the hustle. Daniel quickly became known as one of the sharpest minds in his department. He sat in the front row during lectures, asked questions, and took notes like his life depended on it. He studied late into the night at the library, remembering every insult he had endured about his mother, every time a neighbor called her mad. Those memories fueled him, but academics alone wouldn't put food on his table. So Daniel hustled. He started by helping classmates with assignments and projects for a token. Soon, word spread. If you want it done well, ask Daniel. Later, he bought a small printer with part of his stipend and began typing and printing documents for students. His hostel room became a mini business center. During holidays, instead of going home to rest, he stayed back in town, doing menial jobs, offloading goods in warehouses, washing cars, even running errands for lecturers who trusted his diligence. By his second year, Daniel had saved enough to start selling recharge cards and later, small phones. His classmates respected him not just for his brains, but for his relentless drive. Earning respect. It didn't take long before Daniel became a name on campus. In the classroom, he was the student professors used as an example. If Daniel can score this, the rest of you have no excuse. Among his peers, he was admired for his discipline. While others partied, Daniel kept to his books and his hustle. Even student leaders came to him for advice, because he had a calm wisdom far beyond his years. One lecturer once pulled him aside. Daniel, with your kind of background, many would have given up. But you carry yourself with dignity. Never lose that. The world will open for you. Daniel bowed slightly, smiling. "Thank you, sir. I don't want pity. I just want results." The weight of responsibility. Though he never called home to ask for money, Daniel never forgot his responsibilities. Each time he saved enough, he sent a portion back to his grandmother. "Buy Mama's medicine," his letters always said. "Make sure she eats well." His grandmother, touched, sometimes cried while reading his letters. This boy, even in school, still carries us on his back. Grace, though lost in her own world, often giggled when she heard his name. Mama Esther would smile softly and whisper, "One day, your son will make you proud before the whole world." The fuel of pain. What others saw as Daniel's strength was really pain transformed. Each night, after long hours of reading or hustling, he would lie on his hostel bed, staring at the ceiling. In his mind, he would replay the insults of his childhood. "Your mother is mad. Go and wipe your mother's drool. You'll never be anything." And each time, he clenched his fists and whispered, "Watch me." That pain became his fuel. It pushed him to wake earlier, study harder, and hustle longer than anyone else around him. A rising star. By his final year, Daniel was more than just a scholarship student. He was a role model. He had started a small tutorial group where he taught struggling students for free. He organized debates and led his department to win interfaculty competitions. His name carried weight not because he was rich, but because he was dependable, disciplined, and brilliant. When he graduated with top honors, his department threw a small celebration for him. One of his professors said proudly, "Daniel is proof that background does not define destiny." Life after graduation. Graduation day was bittersweet for Daniel. His classmates celebrated with their parents. Fathers in agbada, mothers in lace, siblings snapping pictures with expensive phones. Daniel's grandmother could not travel the long distance, and his mother could not understand what the day meant. He stood quietly on the lawn in his graduation gown, holding his certificate. For a moment, loneliness pricked his heart. But then he remembered his vow. "I didn't come here to show off. I came here to change our story." The first job. Daniel's brilliance did not go unnoticed. During his final year, one of his professors recommended him for a graduate trainee program at a large firm. The pay was modest, but to Daniel it was gold. He worked tirelessly, arriving before others, leaving last, volunteering for the hardest tasks. His bosses noticed. Within a year, he was promoted. By the second year, he was earning enough to rent a small apartment, buy decent clothes, and save. But Daniel never forgot where he came from. Each month, without fail, he sent money home. His letters to Mama Esther always carried the same line. "Take care of Mama Grace. Buy her fruits, keep her clean, and never let her lack." From employee to entrepreneur, Daniel knew a salary alone would not build the future he dreamed of. So he studied the market, used his savings wisely, and started a side business, buying and reselling goods. What began as a small hustle grew rapidly. His sharp mind, honesty, and persistence attracted partners. By his late 20s, Daniel had left his job to run his own business full-time. Within a few years, he was no longer the boy who once hawked pure water. He was a respected businessman with multiple ventures and steady income. The vow remembered. One quiet evening, standing in his new apartment, Daniel stared at the city lights outside his window. He whispered to himself, "Mama has sat long enough in shame. Grandma has carried the weight alone for too many years. It's time." Bringing his mother home. The next weekend, Daniel traveled back to his village. His grandmother's small compound was the same: cracked walls, rusty zinc, and the familiar smell of firewood smoke. Grace sat in her usual spot, her wrapper tied loosely, her eyes vacant but calm. When she saw him, something flickered in her expression. She gave her usual faint giggle, reaching out her hands. Daniel knelt in front of her, tears brimming in his eyes. "Mama, I came to take you home, to my home. You will not sit here again, mocked by neighbors. You will sit in comfort, where no one can call you mad." Mama Esther, standing nearby, broke down in tears. "Daniel, my son, you have done it. You have kept your vow. The journey to a new life. They packed Grace's few belongings. Wrappers, a small box of clothes, and the old stool she loved sitting on. Daniel insisted on bringing the stool along. If she feels familiar things around her, she will be more comfortable, he said. When they arrived at his home in the city, Grace was gently led into a clean, spacious room with soft curtains and a wide bed. For the first time in years, she sat not on a broken stool, but on a cushioned chair. Daniel knelt before her again, holding her hands. "This is your home now, Mama. I promised you. You will eat well, you will rest well, and no one will ever laugh at you again." Grace only giggled faintly, staring at the ceiling. But Daniel's heart swelled with peace. He had fulfilled his vow, the gratitude of a grandmother. Mama Esther visited later that week. When she stepped into Daniel's house and saw her daughter bathed, clothed in clean gowns, and sitting in comfort, she wept openly. She held Daniel's hands tightly. "My son, you are my pride. You are my proof that God answers prayers. Your mother cannot speak, but I will speak for her. She is proud of you." Daniel hugged her gently. "Grandma, everything I am, it is because you never gave up on us." The arrival of the caretaker. After Daniel brought his mother to the city, he knew he couldn't always be there. His business was demanding meetings, travel, long hours, so he decided to hire a personal caretaker. Through a friend's recommendation, a young woman named Stella came into his home. Stella was in her mid-20s, neatly dressed at the interview, polite and respectful. "My duty is simple," Daniel explained firmly. "Take care of my mother as if she were your own. Feed her, bathe her, keep her company. Nothing else matters." Stella nodded. "Yes, sir. I understand." But the moment she saw Daniel closely, she froze a little inside. He wasn't just another employer. He was tall, well-built, and carried himself with quiet confidence. His charm wasn't loud. It was the kind that made people pause. Stella thought to herself, "How is a man like this still single? Handsome, successful, with a big house. Any woman would kill to be here." Professional at first. At the beginning, Stella focused on her work. She bathed Grace carefully, fed her patiently, and made sure she sat in the sun every morning. Daniel would sometimes stop by unexpectedly, and he always noticed his mother looked clean, her room tidy, her food well prepared. "Thank you, Stella," he said one evening. "You're doing well. My mother is looking healthier already." She smiled, bowing her head. "It's my job, sir." But in her heart, she was hoping his gratitude would grow into something more. Testing his eyes. As days turned into weeks, Stella began to test the waters. She started wearing shorter dresses when she knew Daniel would be around. Sometimes, while serving him tea or dropping files he had left on the table, she would accidentally bend a little too far, waiting for him to look. Other times, she made subtle compliments. "You work so hard, sir. Don't you ever get lonely? A man like you shouldn't be staying in this big house alone." Daniel always gave the same polite but distant answers. "My work keeps me busy." Or, "I'm not alone. My mother is here." The more Stella tried, the more she realized something. Daniel's world did not revolve around women. His priority was his mother. Realization and change. At first, Stella was frustrated. Any other man would have fallen by now. "Does he not see me? Am I not attractive?" She thought of giving up, but then another thought crept into her mind. "If I cannot have his love, maybe I can at least have his favor. If I am the one closest to his mother, then I am closest to him." So she changed her approach. Outwardly, she became even more dutiful, waking early to prepare Grace's food, dressing her neatly, speaking gently around Daniel. But inwardly, a quiet bitterness began to grow. Each time she saw Daniel return home, walking past her without a second glance, heading straight to his mother's room before anything else, her heart hardened. She realized she could never compete with Grace for his attention, and that realization twisted into resentment. From that point on, Stella's care was no longer from the heart. She did what was required when Daniel was around, but when he left for work, her mask began to slip. The hidden shift. Grace, helpless and unable to speak, noticed the difference first. When Daniel was home, Stella smiled and spoke softly. When he was gone, her face changed, cold, sharp, impatient. Sometimes she shoved food into Grace's mouth carelessly. Other times, she yanked her arm roughly when leading her to the bathroom. And when Grace drooled or made noises, Stella hissed, "Keep quiet, you useless woman. You're the reason he doesn't see me." But Grace could not talk, could not call for help. All she could do was endure in silence, her eyes sometimes welling with tears that nobody noticed. Stella's secret cruelty. Hidden beatings. At first, Stella's wickedness crept in slowly. When Daniel left for work, she would drop her mask of politeness. Her hands turned harsh, her eyes cold. She kept a small whip hidden in her wardrobe. Whenever Grace made a sound, or her hands trembled while eating, Stella would drag her into the room and flog her across the back and thighs, places where Daniel would never think to check. "Quiet, useless woman," she hissed through her teeth. "You are the reason your son doesn't see me. If not for you, I would be the queen of this house." Grace couldn't cry out. She could only shake silently, tears rolling down her face, her body marked with scars no one saw. Starvation tactics. Sometimes, Stella denied her food and water for hours, watching her lips dry, her stomach twist with hunger. When Daniel came home and asked, "Has she eaten?" Stella would smile sweetly and say, "Yes, sir. She had rice and stew this afternoon." Grace, unable to speak, would sit quietly, her stomach rumbling, her eyes darting desperately to her son. But Daniel never understood. He trusted Stella's words. Verbal cruelty. Stella's venom was not only in her hands but in her words. She bent low to whisper into Grace's ears whenever no one else was around. "You useless old woman. You're the reason he doesn't see me. You ruined everything. If I were in your place, he would love me, not you." Grace trembled at those words. She couldn't respond, couldn't defend herself. She could only sit, helpless, absorbing the poison. Psychological torment. There were days Stella made Grace sit on a hard wooden stool for hours, refusing to let her move to the bed. Other times, when she soiled herself, Stella left her in it, smirking, "Let's see how your precious son will hug you smelling like this." Only minutes before Daniel's return would Stella rush to clean her up, painting herself as the diligent caregiver. To outsiders, Stella was the perfect maid. But inside the house, she was Grace's tormentor. The first signs Daniel noticed. At first, Daniel didn't suspect anything. He came home late, tired, only checking quickly to see his mother sitting neatly dressed. Stella always greeted him with respect, giving full reports of meals and baths. But slowly, Daniel began to notice strange things. When he entered his mother's room, she flinched at Stella's touch, as though expecting a blow. He sometimes saw her trembling, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Once, when he helped her change clothes himself, he noticed faint lines on her thighs, red marks that didn't look like natural scratches. "Mama," he whispered, gently touching them. "What happened?" She only stared back with wet eyes, her lips trembling, but no words came. Daniel's worry deepens. Weeks passed, and Daniel's unease only grew heavier. Each time he returned home, he noticed little things about his mother that didn't add up. Her face seemed thinner, her cheeks sunken as though she wasn't eating enough. Her clothes hung loosely, signs of weight loss. And worse, more strange marks appeared on her back and thighs whenever he helped her change. When he asked Stella, she always had smooth answers. "Oh, sir. She refused to eat today. She must have scratched herself against the wall." Daniel nodded outwardly, but inside he was restless. He knew his mother's silence wasn't from choice. It was because she couldn't speak. And if Stella was lying, he needed a way to see for himself. The camera decision. One night, sitting alone in his study, Daniel whispered to himself, "I can't keep guessing. If something is happening behind my back, I must know." The next day, without Stella's knowledge, Daniel installed discreet cameras in the house. One in the living room, one in his mother's bedroom. to watch how his mother was treated when no one was looking. The first revelation. For a few days, nothing seemed unusual on the recordings. Stella acting polite, feeding Grace slowly, helping her sit, wiping her mouth. But Daniel was patient. He kept checking. Then one night, as he scrolled through the footage, his heart froze. The recording showed Stella in his mother's room, her face twisted with anger. She carried a small whip and struck Grace across her back and thighs, hissing, "You useless woman! You're the reason your son doesn't look at me. I'll teach you to stay quiet." Grace shook silently, tears streaming, but no sound came. Daniel's chest tightened. He replayed it 3 times, each lash sinking into his soul like fire. Starvation uncovered. On another clip, Stella brought food into the room, placed it on the table in front of Grace, then deliberately took it away minutes later, muttering, "You don't deserve this. Let's see how long you last." Later that evening, when Daniel had asked, "Has she eaten?" Stella smiled sweetly at the camera and said, "Yes, sir. She had beans and pap." Daniel's hands trembled as he watched. His jaw clenched until it hurt. The final proof. But the most damning footage came one afternoon. Stella dragged Grace by the arm, forcing her to sit on a hard stool. For hours she left her there, ignoring her whimpers, until Grace's body shook with exhaustion. When Grace shifted uncomfortably, Stella leaned close and whispered cruelly into her ear, "You're nothing. You're the reason he won't touch me. If not for you, I'd be the woman of this house." Daniel, watching this later in his office, felt his entire body go cold. His fists slammed against the desk. So it's true. All this time, my mother has been suffering in silence, right under my roof. The resolve. That night, Daniel sat by his mother's bed as she slept, gently adjusting her blanket. His eyes burned with tears, but his voice was steady. "Mama, I have seen everything. Don't worry. She will never touch you again. I swear on my life. No one will ever hurt you under my roof. The trap is set." The following evening, after reviewing the videos again, Daniel made his move. He quietly called the police, explained everything, and shared clips from the hidden cameras. They assured him they were on their way. Daniel then walked into the living room, where Stella was folding laundry. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. "Stella," he said, his voice low, "come and sit down. We need to talk." She looked up, slightly nervous, but forced a smile. "Yes, sir." She sat opposite him, folding her hands on her lap. "The questions begin." Daniel leaned forward. "What happened to my mother's back? The marks I saw, how did they get there?" Stella's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Sir, I don't know. Maybe she scratched herself against the wall. You know she moves carelessly sometimes." Slap. Daniel's palm landed hard across her cheek. She gasped, holding her face. "Don't lie to me," he snapped. "Tell me the truth." She stammered. "I swear, sir, I feed her. I bathe her. I've never hurt her." Slap. Another blow resounded. Daniel's fury rose with each denial. "Do you think I am blind? Do you think I don't know what has been happening under my own roof?" The confession. Finally, tears spilled from Stella's eyes. Her voice cracked. Okay, I'll talk." She trembled, her words spilling out in a rush. I was obsessed with you, Daniel. From the first day I saw you, I wanted you to notice me. But you never looked my way. You only cared about your mother. Every day it was her. I hated her for it. I thought if I punished her, maybe you'd see me instead." Daniel's face twisted with disgust. His voice thundered. "So you thought beating, starving, and tormenting a helpless woman, my mother, would make me love you? You're sick, wicked. And you call that love?" She fell to her knees, sobbing. "Please, forgive me. I lost control. I'll never do it again." Daniel's final words. Daniel stood over her, fists clenched. "Do you know what makes it worse? I noticed you too. I was watching you, trying to see the kind of person you were before I let you close to me. And now I see clearly. You are a snake. The arrest. At that very moment, a knock sounded at the gate. Daniel didn't move. Get up, he ordered Stella coldly. Two police officers entered the house moments later. Daniel pointed at her without hesitation. That is the woman. She abused my mother. You have the evidence already. Take her. Stella's eyes widened in horror. She grabbed Daniel's leg. Please, please don't do this. I'll change. Daniel yanked his leg away. The time for change is over. You will answer for everything you've done. The officers cuffed her hands, ignoring her wails. As they led her out, neighbors gathered, murmuring in shock. Daniel stood tall, his chest heaving, but his face set like stone. Aftermath. When the house grew quiet again, Daniel went straight to his mother's room. She sat there, staring blankly, unaware of the full drama that had just unfolded. He knelt by her side, holding her frail hand. "Mama," he whispered, tears glistening in his eyes. "She will never touch you again. I promise you, with everything in me, you are safe now." Grace gave a faint giggle, her eyes meeting his for a moment. And though she could not speak, Daniel felt her heart understood. Daniel's decision. After Stella's arrest, Daniel sat long into the night, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed every hidden clip he had watched, every mark on his mother's body, every flinch he had ignored for too long. His fists tightened. "Never again," he swore. "I will never leave Mama at the mercy of outsiders." The next morning, he picked up his phone and dialed the one person he trusted completely. His grandmother, Mama Esther. The call to Grandma. Her voice came on the line, weak with age but filled with warmth. "Daniel, my son, how are you?" Daniel's voice shook. "Mama, I need you. Please, come and stay with me. Come and take care of your daughter. You are the only one I trust with her." There was silence on the other end. Then he heard her sob quietly. "My son, what happened? Why are you saying this?" Daniel swallowed hard, his chest burning. "The caretaker I hired. She was hurting Mama, beating her, starving her, treating her like nothing. I have the proof. I've handed her to the police. But Mama, I can't trust anyone else again. Please, only you." Mama Esther wept openly now, the pain in her heart flowing through her voice. So after all her suffering, after all her silence, someone still raised a hand against my child? "Yes, Mama," Daniel said, tears falling freely. "And I will never forgive myself for allowing it under my roof. Please come. I beg you." The arrival. 2 days later, Daniel drove to the village himself. When Mama Esther saw him at her door, she embraced him tightly, her frail hands trembling. "My son," she said, wiping her eyes. "I will come. Even if I am old, I will care for her until God calls me. I cannot leave her in anyone else's hands again." Together, they packed her small bag. She insisted on bringing a few wrappers and her Bible. "Those are all I need," she said softly. The reunion. When they reached Daniel's house in the city, Grace was seated quietly in her room, her face blank as usual. But the moment Mama Esther stepped inside and called her name softly, "Grace, my daughter," something shifted. Grace's eyes lit faintly. Her lips curved into a weak smile, and for the first time in weeks, she let out a joyful giggle. She stretched her arms slightly, as if recognizing her mother's familiar presence. Daniel froze, his chest tightening with emotion. He had not seen his mother look that bright in a long time. Mama Esther knelt beside her, hugging her gently, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My child, my Grace, I am here now. Nobody will hurt you again." Daniel's gratitude. Watching them, Daniel felt an overwhelming peace settle in his heart. He bent low beside his grandmother, taking her hand. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you for everything you've done. For me, for her. I failed her once by trusting the wrong person, but I will never fail again. With you here, I know she is safe." Mama Esther patted his hand softly. "My son, you did not fail. You fought for her. You stood up for her when she could not stand. That is what makes you a true son, a brighter home. From that day forward, the house felt different. Grace, though still trapped in her silence, appeared calmer, even happier, whenever her mother was nearby. Mama Esther sang hymns while feeding her, wiped her gently when bathing her, and prayed over her every night before bed. Daniel, watching from the doorway, often smiled through his tears. His home, once shadowed by Stella's cruelty, now breathed warmth and safety again. And deep inside, Daniel knew. Family may struggle, family may break under pressure, but when true love returns, it heals what the world tried to destroy. A new phase of life. With Mama Esther now living under his roof, Daniel finally felt peace. He could leave for work without fear, knowing his mother was cared for with love. At night, when he returned, he often heard the soft hum of hymns drifting from his mother's room. The sight of Mama Esther sitting beside Grace, holding her hand and whispering prayers, filled Daniel with renewed strength. It was as though the home itself had been cleansed of all darkness. The laughter that Stella had silenced slowly returned. Not from Grace, who remained quiet, but from Daniel and his grandmother, who now spoke with lighter hearts. The encouragement to marry. One evening after dinner, Mama Esther called Daniel aside. Her eyes, though tired, still sparkled with wisdom. "My son," she said gently, "you have carried too much. Alone for too long. You've built a business, a home, and you've honored us. But you cannot stay like this forever. Every man needs a companion, someone who will share his burdens and his joys. Have you thought about marriage?" Daniel sighed deeply. "Mama, I've thought about it, but I've been afraid. Afraid to bring someone into this house who may not love or respect Mama the way we do. I cannot go through that pain again." Mama Esther patted his hand. "Not every woman is cruel. God will give you the right one. A woman who will not only love you but also stand by your mother and treat her as her own." Daniel nodded slowly, her words planting a seed in his heart. Meeting Sarah. It wasn't long after that Daniel met Sarah, a nurse he crossed paths with at a health seminar his company sponsored. She was calm, intelligent, and spoke with the kind of kindness that reminded him of his grandmother. They became friends first, meeting for coffee, sharing stories about their families, and gradually Daniel opened up about his mother. Unlike others who might have pulled away, Sarah's eyes filled with compassion. "Your mother is not a burden," she said softly one evening. "She is your blessing. She gave you life. Caring for her is an honor, not shame." Those words pierced Daniel's heart. For the first time, he felt someone truly understood. Introducing her to the family. After months of friendship, Daniel brought Sarah home. His heart raced as he introduced her to Mama Esther and Grace. Sarah knelt respectfully to greet Mama Esther, holding her hands warmly. "Mama, thank you for raising such a good man." Then she walked to Grace's side. Instead of recoiling, she bent low, touched her gently, and said, "Good evening, Mama. My name is Sarah." To everyone's surprise, Grace giggled faintly and held Sarah's hand, the same way she responded only to Mama Esther and Daniel. Daniel's eyes welled with tears. He knew then that Sarah was different. The proposal and wedding. 2 years later, after careful prayer and guidance, Daniel proposed. He didn't do it with extravagance but with sincerity, kneeling before Sarah and saying, "You've shown me love, not just with words but with actions. You've loved my family as yours. I cannot imagine life without you. Sarah, will you marry me?" Her answer was simple and sure. "Yes, Daniel. 1,000 times yes." Their wedding was modest but beautiful, nothing like the grand, debt-filled ceremonies of others. It was full of joy, music, and heartfelt prayers. Mama Esther sat in the front row, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Grace, dressed in a simple gown, was wheeled in beside her, her eyes brighter than usual. A full house. Marriage brought warmth into Daniel's home. Sarah treated Grace like her own mother, feeding her, massaging her hands, sometimes reading aloud to her in the evenings. Mama Esther often watched with relief. "God truly answered my prayers," she said. Within a few years, Daniel and Sarah were blessed with children. Their laughter filled the house, running through the hallways, bringing life where there was once only silence. And in the middle of it all sat Grace, unable to speak, unable to move like others, but finally surrounded by love and joy. Her grandchildren often played near her, tugging her wrappers, giggling as she gave her soft, childlike laughs. Daniel's reflection. One night, after tucking his children into bed, Daniel stood at the doorway of his mother's room. He saw Sarah adjusting Grace's blanket, Mama Esther humming a hymn, and his mother smiling faintly in her chair. His heart swelled. From the boy who hawked on the streets and endured insults about his mother, to the man who now had a thriving home filled with love, Daniel knew his story had come full circle. He whispered to himself, "This is what I fought for. This is the life Mama deserves." And for the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to rest. Not in fear, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. Mama Esther's later years. As the years went by, Mama Esther grew frilier. Her once quick steps slowed into careful shuffles, her back bent lower, and her voice softened with age. Yet her spirit remained strong. She spent most mornings sitting on the veranda with Grace, the two of them side by side. She would hold her daughter's hand and hum old hymns while watching Daniel's children play. Sometimes she whispered, "God, you kept me long enough to see this joy. You've turned our mourning into laughter." Sarah often sat with her, massaging her legs and bringing her tea. Daniel made sure she lacked nothing. But everyone could see that time was drawing near. Her blessings. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Mama Esther called Daniel, Sarah, and the children to her room. Grace was already there, sitting quietly. With trembling hands, Mama Esther placed her palm on Daniel's head. "My son," she said, her voice steady despite her weakness. "You are the proof that God does not abandon his own. You rose from shame and suffering to build a home of love. Never forget, your strength came from honoring your mother. Because you cared for her, God will care for you." She turned to Sarah, holding her hand tightly. "My daughter, you are a crown on Daniel's head. You did not despise Grace. You embraced her as your own mother. Because of this, your children will never lack helpers in their time of need." Finally, she stretched her frail arms toward the children, placing them on their heads one by one. "My little ones, grow in wisdom, grow in kindness. May you carry this family's story forward, not of shame, but of victory." Then, she leaned close to Grace and kissed her forehead. Tears slid down her cheeks. "My child, my Grace, I have carried you all these years, but now I leave you in safe hands. Daniel will never let you suffer again." The peaceful passing. Not long after that night, Mama Esther fell ill. Her body could no longer carry her spirit. She spent her last days surrounded by love. Sarah at her bedside, Daniel reading psalms aloud, the children tiptoeing in with drawings to cheer her. One quiet morning, after Sarah had prayed softly by her side, Mama Esther sighed deeply, smiled faintly, and whispered, "It is well." Then she closed her eyes and passed peacefully. The funeral. Daniel organized a burial that honored her life. It wasn't extravagant, but it was filled with respect. Neighbors, church members, and even strangers came to pay tribute. They spoke of her sacrifices, her prayers, her endurance. "She was the root that held this family together," the pastor said. "And through her faith, God has blessed generations after her." Daniel stood tall, but tears streamed down his face as he watched her lowered into the earth. Sarah held his hand tightly, and his children clung to his legs. After Mama Esther, the house felt different without her presence. The veranda chair she always sat in remained empty. The hymns she used to hum faded into memory, but her blessings lingered. Daniel often remembered her words, "Because you cared for her, God will care for you." And indeed, his life began to flourish even more. His business expanded into new regions. His children excelled in school, and Sarah's unwavering love continued to strengthen their home. Grace, though still silent, seemed calmer after her mother's passing, as if some part of her had understood the shift. She spent her days surrounded by grandchildren's laughter, never neglected, never unloved. Daniel's reflection. One evening, sitting in the garden after a long day, Daniel watched his children play. Sarah sat nearby, reading, while Grace dozed peacefully in her chair. He thought of Mama Esther, her tears, her prayers, her sacrifices. He thought of the insults he once endured, the streets he once hustled on, the nights he went to bed hungry, and he whispered into the air, "Mama Esther, I will not fail your legacy. I will keep building, keep protecting, keep loving. Because of you, we stand." Daniel as a father. Years rolled by, and Daniel grew into the fullness of fatherhood. The boy who once hawked biscuits on the roadside now had children who lacked nothing. But Daniel never let them grow entitled. He often sat them down in the evenings, telling them the story of his childhood. "I was your age when I first started hustling," he would say, his voice calm but firm. "People laughed at me because of my mother's condition. They mocked me, but I turned the pain into fuel. If you want to be great, don't run from hard work. And never forget where you came from." He taught them to save from their allowances, to work during school holidays, and to treat everyone, from security guards to market women, with respect. "Honor is not about how much money you have," he reminded them. "It is about how you treat people, especially those who cannot fight for themselves." Sarah, by his side, reinforced those values with gentleness. Together, they raised children who were not just bright in school but also compassionate in heart. Grace's silent grief. Though Grace never regained her full faculties, she had moments of awareness that pierced the family's hearts. When Mama Esther died, Grace sensed it. For days afterward, she grew restless, her giggles gone, her eyes clouded with sorrow. She sat for long hours staring at the veranda where her mother once sat, as though waiting to see her again. Sometimes, at night, Daniel heard her whimper softly, shaking her head as if calling out silently for her mother. He would kneel by her side, holding her hands tightly. "Mama," he whispered, his own tears falling. "I know you miss her. I miss her too. But you still have me. You still have Sarah. You still have the children. We will never leave you." Though she couldn't reply, Grace would hold his gaze for long moments, a faint wetness in her eyes, a silent language of grief and love, surrounded by love. In her final years, Grace was never left alone. The grandchildren loved sitting by her side, even if she could not talk back. They drew pictures and showed them to her, giggling whenever she managed a faint smile. Sometimes Sarah sat beside her, reading scripture aloud, while Daniel massaged her frail hands, whispering prayers under his breath. She was fragile, but she was surrounded by warmth, the very thing she had been denied in the darkest years of her life. Grace's final days. One morning, Daniel noticed that his mother was weaker than usual. Her hands trembled more, and her head leaned heavily on the cushion. Sarah quickly checked her and called the doctor, but deep inside Daniel knew the time was near. He called his children together. "Go and greet your grandmother," he said softly. They knelt one by one, kissing her hands, whispering their love. Sarah prayed quietly at her side. Daniel sat closest, holding her frail hands against his chest. "Mama," he whispered, his voice breaking, "you have fought long. You have endured what no woman should endure. But you gave me life and you gave me strength. Rest now, Mama. Rest in peace. I will carry everything you left behind." For the first time in years, Grace looked directly into his eyes with unusual clarity. A faint tear slid down her cheek, her lips trembling as though she wanted to say something, but no words came. She exhaled softly, her body relaxing, and then she was gone. The legacy. Grace's burial was simple but dignified. Daniel stood tall as people whispered about her journey. The woman who suffered tragedy, yet raised a son who changed their family's story. Afterward, Daniel doubled down on the lessons for his children. He often told them, "Your grandmother couldn't speak, but her silence shouted louder than any voice. She taught me sacrifice, patience, and strength. And I expect you to carry that legacy forward." His children grew up excelling in their studies, each of them imbued with the same resilience that had carried him. They learned that honor was not in riches, but in standing for family, for dignity, and for truth. Daniel's reflection in old age. Years later, when Daniel himself had gray hair, he would sometimes sit on the veranda where Mama Esther once hummed hymns, with his grandchildren playing around him. Looking up at the sky, he often whispered, "Mama Esther, Mama Grace, your lives were hard, but your sacrifices built this joy we see today. Rest easy. Your legacy lives on." And in those quiet moments, Daniel knew he had not only redeemed his mother's story, he had transformed it into a generational testimony. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, share with friends, and subscribe for more amazing stories.